just to everybody who's watching in the live stream, we want to get to your questions and your objections for Erick, so please stick around. Looking forward to taking them. But I think we should probably touch upon the Filioque, and then at least touch upon that before we start delving into questions. What do we mean by that? What does Filioque mean? Why is it a source of contention between Catholics and Orthodox?
Yeah, so the Filioque, this is it's a very complex debate theologically. We won't even begin to touch the surface of theology, but the councils of the church, the first four ecumenical councils, were dealing with a lot of controversies that came about in the East. They made it to the West, but the hotbed was the East, and so a lot of the theological thinking was done in the East. And so this idea of trying to understand how you have 1 in 3, 3 in 1 was the big challenge. How do you have monotheism and not tritheism with the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit? And so you had theologians that were trying to understand how this works. And the Cappadocian theologians in the East, they developed a certain way of thinking about the triads, the Father, the Son, and the Spirit. And the West, long story short, had its own departure of how to think about this. They were both essentially correct, but there are some significant differences that you're going to see on first and second level of theological exegesis. And so the East always wanted to understand that the Father was the sole monarch of the Trinity. All of the production of persons in the Trinity come from the Father. The Father that's what makes him Father. He is the sole principle, the monarch of the Trinity, the one person out of which comes the Son and the Holy Spirit. And in the West understood that the monarchy of the Father was important, which is why Augustine and all the Filioquists in the West still maintain that the Father alone is the sole cause, you could say, of the producing the persons of the Trinity. However, in the West, and we see this beginning with Tertullian, it comes up in Ambrose, it comes up in Hilary of Poitiers, comes up in Augustine mainly, that there is some relationship of the Son in the breathing out of the Holy Spirit, and not just in relation to creation, but in relation to the inner life of God. And the East, by the time the East heard of this, the first time they heard of it was actually from a fellow Easterner, Cyril of Alexandria. But when they started hearing about this in the West, it really raised eyebrows. And it really came to a head, with Photius of Constantinople. And basically his accusations are summarized in his mystagogy, that this makes it does all kinds of damage to the Trinity. And so the East and the West, there was reunion efforts, obviously, at the Council of Lyons in Florence. And basically the Catholic Church at Florence said there's two ways to bridge these two. There's one way to bridge these two beliefs. And so the Catholic Church has been able to absorb the Cappadocian and the Augustinian form. But the Eastern Orthodox are really staking it out that the Cappadocian way is the only way to think of this. And so that's it's a really, really complex debate. I wish I could go into it, but it's just...
Yeah, I mean, what do you say to those who say it was the West that added the Filioque to the creed, and therefore we ought to remove it and just agree with the East?
Yeah, well, I mean, that again, that's another complex debate, because some of the canonical rules against additions to the creed didn't pertain to the Nicene Constantinopolitan Creed. It pertained to the Nicene Creed, and yet there was additions done there at the Constantinople 381. Again, Richard Price, who's a patristic scholar, him and a number of other scholars in a book called Chalcedon in Context, talks about the canonical origins of that lock on the creed. and whether it really meant no additions, no word additions. I would say that, in short, it really comes down to this. If the church has the authority to lock the creed, then the same church has the authority to unlock the creed. And if we deny that, then we're denying that the church had the authority to lock the creed in the first place. So, long story short, without getting into all the conciliar machinery with Constantinople 879, because I know some of the Orthodox are thinking about that, it really does boil down to whether the church can unlock the creed again. And we argue that rests on papal authority, which is why the papacy today is really the center of disagreement. It used to be Filioque, now it's really the papacy, and so that's the long story short on that one. But okay. I would say Orthodox agreed twice to the Filioque at the Council of Lyons 1274 and Florence 1439, but of course, it didn't end up. It ended up folding because the Eastern bishops did not go along with it.
Thank you for watching this clip. You can click here to watch the full episode. And I want to say a big thanks to our sponsors and to our amazing patrons for making all of this possible. Please do us a favor before you go. Click that subscribe button and then the bell. And that way YouTube will be forced to let you know every time we put out a new episode.